Google recently released the Pixel 5, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of confused. When they initially revealed the phone, the presentation really felt like an ad. It didn't seem genuine at all, and I wonder why, because after having this phone for a few weeks, my general thoughts is that, while this isn't the Pixel 5 we were necessarily hoping for, it's kind of, dare I say, perfect for the asking price? Yeah, not exactly perfect, but I think maybe this is what Pixel phones were always meant to be, and it just took a while for Google to find their footing. I think they found their footing by taking 2 steps back and 3 steps forward. And I'll explain what that means. The Pixel 5 looks very familiar to the Pixel 4 that I reviewed here on the channel last year, until you flip it over to see that we've now got a full screen display. Finally, the flagship Google phone has a full screen bezel-less design, and I'm here for it. And speaking of that display, we've still got a high refresh rate 90Hz screen display, meaning that general navigation on the phone is going to feel super smooth all the time. The Sorter Sage color is probably the highlight of this phone as far as the design goes. And while this isn't nearly as bright as the orange Pixel 4 that came out last year, I actually never got that one, it looks really good with some light on it, and it's definitely worth getting over the Just Black Pixel 5. The Just Black Pixel 5 is sort of boring. But wait a minute, there's a fingerprint scanner on the back right here. The Pixel 4 had the face detection and all the swipey gesture stuff. What happened to all that? Well, my assumption is that Google got rid of that stuff in order to get the Pixel 5 to the price point that it is, which we'll get into a bit later. But generally speaking, the fingerprint scanner works just as well as it did on the Pixel 4a that I reviewed about a month ago here on the channel. Perfectly fine. Probably the fastest fingerprint scanner I've ever used, honestly. Not that that really means much at this point in time. And with everything going on this year, Google probably made the perfect decision by putting a fingerprint scanner on the Pixel 5. We all know everybody's wearing masks, at least you should be. You better be. But yeah, my daily driver is an iPhone, and I'm not gonna lie, it is super annoying always having to type in my passcode once Face ID fails. Sometimes it works, but it's pretty inconsistent. I don't have to worry about that here. I just tap and go. Now, the Pixel 5 not only has wireless charging this time around, but we've got reverse wireless charging in the form of what Google's calling battery share. And this simply allows you to put something like wireless charging headphones on the back of the Pixel 5, and you can charge it like so. And it's pretty cool, the concept of being able to turn your phone into a wireless charging mat. But I gotta be honest, I'm sitting here charging the Pixel Buds with my phone, and I just can't really see myself ever doing this often in a real-world situation. Granted, I'm not like a lot of other people, especially when it comes to tech, and I basically live off the internet, so I essentially always need to be connected to my phone in some form. So if I'm at home, I'm not going to need to do this because I can just put it on a dedicated charger.
Nope.
And if I'm out and about, I'm not going to want to render my phone useless for the sake of charging up my headphones, you know? And there's no magnets on here, there's no way to secure it, so
Nope.
you can't really be mobile with this. I don't know, this is kind of a throwaway, even though the concept in and of itself is cool. In the past year, I've kind of taken a stance on this channel to avoid talking about specs and numbers as much as humanly possible and purely focus on the user experience, but Google did something this year that I didn't think they'd ever do, and something that I really can't ignore, which is throw in a lower-end processor into their flagship phone. And this has a lot of people wondering how this phone is going to compare to other flagships like the iPhone 12, the Galaxy Note 20, as far as performance. My take on it is that we'll probably have to monitor how this holds up in the long term. I don't really do long-term reviews often, but maybe this will be the exception. But so far, so good. This phone feels perfectly fine. This phone isn't really that good for mobile gaming purely because of the screen size, at least in my opinion. So if you're big on mobile gaming, this probably isn't the phone for you. But just doing general stuff, watching YouTube videos, browsing social media, web browsing, stuff like that, it all feels fast and fluid. It doesn't feel like I'm using a $700 phone as opposed to a $1,000 flagship phone. It feels just like I'm using a fast phone. Now, the cameras. My thoughts on the cameras are a little bit different this time around. We all know the Google Pixel is going to take great photos, a low light, dynamic range, contrast. It's all awesome here on the Pixel 5, just like any other Pixel phone I've talked about on this channel. But it feels like as far as pure image quality, Google's been kind of stagnant as far as making changes. I don't feel like we've gotten a substantially better camera as far as image quality since like Pixel 3-ish. But Google did address a major complaint I had with the Pixel 4 as far as the cameras, and that was the lens choice. They had a normal lens and then a telephoto lens on the Pixel 4. This time around, we've got the normal lens and then an ultra-wide lens, which makes much more sense for a dual lens setup. Having an ultra-wide lens is much more convenient for a lot more situations. It's much more useful. It looks a lot more creative in certain scenarios. It's just a lot more fun to use. Performance in low light for the ultra-wide lens is pretty good as well. In some instances, better than my iPhone 11 Pro and 12 Pro. But overall, Google's done another excellent job with the photography setup here on the Pixel 5. Photos are awesome, reliable, and you don't feel like you're ever going to get a bad shot with the Pixel 5. It just really doesn't miss. This year, Google has really gone ham with the video, and that's where you're going to see the most upgrades here as far as the Pixel 5's camera. So firstly, you've now got the ability to record 4K video at 60 frames per second. So if you wanted to get a few slow-mo clips here and there, you might be able to do it in a bit crispier of a fashion. And this, without a doubt, should have been on the Pixel 4, but hey, never late than never, right? We also got to talk about the image stabilization. So the Pixel 5 uses electronic or software image stabilization to get smoother handheld footage and is literally robotic. It's like you're using a stabilizer. It is insanely smooth. I compared it to the iPhone 12 Pro a bit, and it is miles better, like miles better. I didn't mean to do that. So I'm not going to go out and say that the Pixel 5 has dethroned the iPhone for video or anything like that, but I think if they continue to pay more attention to the video and the pixels at this rate, I think they definitely could at some point. "5G has arguably been the biggest marketing point as far as the Pixel 5 on Google's end. But even here in a major city, one of the top 3 cities in America, 5G availability is essentially little to none. There are maybe like 3 spots here in Chicago where I can get 5G. And so I'm just going to say if this phone was 4G and not 5G, I would not care because 5G availability just isn't there yet. And so the fact that companies like Google and Apple are pushing this so hard, it doesn't really make much sense to me, but I get it. It will be a thing eventually, just not for a while. And 5G comes with drawbacks as well. Manufacturers have to put new modems inside of the smartphones, which costs more money, which drains the battery more. And I'll get into battery in a second here with the Pixel 5, but 5G is really more of a burden at this point than, an advantage. I take that back. I'm not going to say burden. I think that's a very strong choice wording. I would say it can be more of an inconvenience just based on how much the phone can end up costing you because the manufacturers have to pay to get 5G capability. It has an effect on battery life depending on the device, but we're going to get into that right now. That's not really the case here with the Pixel 5 because not only is it a $700 phone, a few $100 cheaper than it was with the Pixel 4 last year, but the battery life is insane. This truly is a battery life I've experienced on an Android flagship in years. There are millions of Android devices, so there are going to be a few exceptions, of course, but I'm talking about as far as the primaries. Google, LG, Samsung. This has been the best I've had in years. Granted, things are a bit different now as far as my usage with smartphones. I haven't really moved from this spot since March of this year, and so I'm not out of the house all too often, and so I might not be getting true hardcore usage out of the phone, but I can definitely tell right off the bat compared to other phones I've tested this year that this is definitely the GOAT as far as battery life for flagship phones in 2020. Now, if 5G was everywhere and I was constantly utilizing that radio to its nearly maximum potential, then maybe things would be different. But at its current stage, and I can gladly say at least for the next 1 to 2 years, that's not going to be the case for most people. But the best way to describe the battery life in general, especially as a reviewer, is that the battery life is so good. Every time I pick up the phone and look at the battery life, it makes me feel like I'm not using it enough. Probably my biggest gripe with the Pixel 5 is the speakers. At one point, Google prided themselves on the multimedia experience, especially with speakers. Think about devices like the Nexus 7, the Nexus 6, the Nexus 6P. All those devices had really good sound experiences with the iPhone 12 Pro, and we're just going to do a comparison just to kind of show you how bad the Pixel 5 speakers really are. Now, granted, this isn't a $1,000 smartphone, but the difference in speaker quality from a $700 smartphone and a $1,000 smartphone should not be that big. And that's because with the addition of a full screen display, it seems as though Google's essentially put the earpiece speaker under the glass, and so it sounds really muffled, but even on the primary speaker, the low end is really non-existent. It overall it doesn't sound good for a $700 smartphone. It sounds like a $300 smartphone speaker, quite honestly. But since there's just so much to love about the Pixel 5, and it's a bit cheaper than last year, I'll give this a pass a little bit, like half a pass, like a 5-minute pass as opposed to an hour-long pass. So, processor in the smartphone, but they added some really nice features for video. The battery life is absolutely amazing and the best I've had on any Google phone. And they made it a lot more affordable and a lot more competitive at this price point. The Google Pixel 5 is taking 2 steps back and 3 steps forward, and I think they found their footing. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.
Hey everybody, it's Lon Seib.